The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Modern Fantasy. Sign the promo code SGPN to score up to $1,000 bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgames.com/RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently Friday morning, roughly 2 a.m. Eastern Time on August 30th. I'm Rosso with Scott Reichel once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to get into the third round of the U.S. Open. So once again, we're going to continue our overall format. We're going to go through a decent amount of the matches, not all of them, because we don't have enough time to do so. Point is, though, should be fun, so get comfortable. We're going to be covering some matches for the next couple of days in this episode. Now, before we get into any of that, one reminder once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. We finally broke 500 subscribers. I believe we're at 510 now. So thank you to all of you who ended up subscribing, and hopefully we end up passing a 600 over the next couple of weeks. Either way, though, a point is, don't forget, though, you can still like and subscribe on YouTube if you have not done so. And a reminder, you can also join the live stream and the overall comment section in the YouTube video afterwards to leave some feedback. But if you're still listening to it audio only on Spotify or Apple, that's okay too. Don't forget, though, to leave a rating and a review. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. A lot of great overall Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have sweatshirts, t-shirts, and mugs, all affordable, and the shirts are very comfortable. So I recommend getting yourself something. And we also have a good deal for football because everything on the merch store is 10% off with the promo code football. So if you want to get something Tennis Gambling Podcast related, a shirt, a sweatshirt, or a mug, use promo code football at checkout, and you'll get 10% off anything you want. Now, anyway, time to get into the actual reminder, by the way, about college football, because we saw a decent amount of Week 1 games on Thursday. A reminder, the college football for Week 1 already started, but there are a lot of games coming up on Saturday. And if you do want to get some feedback or some opinions on those games, check out the Sports Camp Podcast and the College Football Experience for your Week 1 picks. Anyway, time to start off with the actual recap of our lock and dog picks for the second round. Overall, decent. Won the lock and lost the dog. So for the lock, ended up winning. We had Cerundolo and Echeverry under, half a tiebreak at plus 108. Said it might be annoying because the match might end up going 4 or 5. It went 5, and we had no breakers. Really never in doubt. The only, I'd say, dangerous moment for us was in the second set when it was tied 4-4, but it was only there because Echeverry went 0 for 7 on break points in the last couple of return games prior. So it shouldn't have even gotten to that point, but it did, and then Cerundolo eventually broke with his first break point to get the job done there in the 4-5 game. But after that, we kind of coasted. Echeverry came back and won, but either way, point is none of the sets went to 7-5. So pretty straightforward there. Nice lock winner there at plus money. For the dog, though, went with the Shang injury fade. Did not work out as Baena did lose in straight sets. Took the money line, though, at plus 215. Maybe put too much stock in the Shang fitness, but I thought it made sense at the time. And Baena did have a couple breakpoint chances late in the third set. Maybe he could have forced a fourth. If he did, maybe it would have gotten interesting. We don't really know for sure. Point is, though, Shang did win the first 2 sets comfortably, and then the third set was a war, which Baena ended up getting killed in the breaker in. So either way, I picked up a loss there for the dog, but ended up splitting. Could have been worse. Look for a sweep here in the third round. Now, getting into the actual second round recap, going to go through the matches in order, not all of them. So for starters, Echeverry, I mentioned before, did win in 5. I was shocked he won. I thought after he rolled his ankle on the set point in the third set, I thought it was cooked. We saw Cerundolo win the fourth set 6-1. Then he went up a break to start the fifth set. So I thought Echeverry was going to be done for. And then he broke back, and then he broke again. As Echeverry ended up winning 6-3 in the final set. So nice win for him. Cerundolo, really the last couple of months have just showcased the frustration that you have as a fan watching him play. Because he could have a phenomenal week in Umag where he just dominates and he looks like an incredible top 10 potential player. And then he immediately implodes right after it. And that's kind of been the story of his career. And unfortunately, he did flop in the second round of the U.S. Open. Nice win for Echeverry, though. We'll see how the ankle feels, but point is, nice job coming baback in the fifth set. Dimitrov beat Hichikata again in straight sets. He had a 2-0 comeback in the Leheshka match as he won 7-5 in the fifth. I believe he fought off a couple break points, actually, but ended up getting the job done there, 7-5. Baez got injured, ended up quitting in the second set. I ended up seeing Zverev win in straight sets against Muller. Tiafoe won in 2 sets in retirement against Shevchenko. Did like the Tiafoe in straight sets angle at plus 115. It was going to get there, but Shevchenko had injured and quit. Rublev came back from 2 sets down to beat Rinderknech, mostly because Rinderknech ran out of gas. It was extremely hot and humid at the U.S. Open, and a lot of players were complaining and retiring because the conditions were awful. And you saw Rinderknech run out of gas after winning the second set 7-5. Took all his energy out, and Rublev killed him from that point forward, as he only lost 5 games in the final 3 sets combined. Komensanya pulled off an upset against Humbert I like Coleman Sanya. He's a good player. We saw him make a pretty good run in Wimbledon, and he was able to beat Humbert. So nice job by him losing the first set and coming back. Mentioned before that Chang beat Baena in 3. Papiron beat Martinez in straight sets, not a shock there. Shelton beat Agut, nice win for him there in straight sets. Musetti beat Kekmanovic in a 5. That was a marathon. I believe he fought off a couple match points as well, and he got the job done in the final set 7-5. Ruud ended up beating Monfils. Fun match there in 4. Did it like Ruud to win and both players to win a set of plus money. That got there as he won in 4. Fritz killed Berrettini. That really wasn't that close as he ended up winning 6-3, 7-6, 6-1. The margin shocked me. I thought that Berrettini had a shot to maybe even win the match, and he got destroyed. It was a nice win there by Fritz. He looked great. Then you had Djokovic, who won in 2.5 sets, basically, as Desir had Djokovic on the ropes, let him off the hook, then he got injured, and he ended up having to retire. Moving on to the matches that we ended up seeing on a Thursday. So for this overall card, a lot of straight set wins throughout the entire day. In fact, you had one 5-setter. You only had 5 matches in the entire day that did not end in straight sets. So kind of surprising. But you saw Arnaldi beat Safulin in straight sets. O'Connell beat Bellucci in 4. Monkic killed Korda. He won in straight sets. I thought Thompson was alive against Hurkacz. He won in straight sets. So a nice underdog win there for Thompson. Sinner killed Nicholson, ended up bageling him in the second set. That was pretty straightforward. Borges ended up beating Kokkinakis in straight sets. Goffin had a fun match against Manarino, which he won in 4. Did it like Goffin minus 1.5 sets. That got there. Not easy. In fact, he was down 5-2 in the 4th. Came back and he won 7-6. Draper beat Diaz Acosta. You saw Caboli beat Bergs in 4. De Minaur won in straight sets. Fees lost to Diallo. Not a shock there if you actually watch the overall match play out. Thought Diallo was the more consistent player throughout the course of the match. You had the match of probably the round, which was Mensik against Schoolcat, which was phenomenal. And Mensik ended up winning the final 2 sets via breaker. Very fun match, 4+ hours, and he got the job done. He fought off 2 match points in the 4th set, and that really was the match of the day. You ended up seeing Evans show no signs of fatigue. He got off to a slow start against Navone. Navone, though, was really bad on hard court, and Evans beat him in straight sets. Purcell got injured, ended up quitting the 3rd set. Medvedev beat Morozin. And then you had the upset of all upsets for the event so far. Alcaraz, who was about minus 8,000, minus 10,000, lost to Dzanchulp in straight sets, which was, I believe, about 100-1 entering the match. But Alcaraz was awful, and Dzanchulp kind of just destroyed him as the match went on. And it looked like Alcaraz kind of got back on track there when he was able to break back in the 2-3 game in the 3rd set. But then Dzanchulp broke him again at 4-4, and he held to love to win the match. So, phenomenal win by Dzanchulp in that one. A shocking loss by Alcaraz. People are calling it one of the biggest upsets of all time. I'd pump the brakes. Tennis has been around for a long, long time. There have been crazier upsets. I mean, I think thinking of crazy upsets that you could even mention, just if you want to go through the men's card, I remember Federer losing to Tipsarevic in the Australian Open. You had Istomin, who beat Djokovic in the Australian Open. There's been a couple of really crazy upsets. If you want to throw in Dustin Brown beating Nadal in Wimbledon. I mean, if you want to throw in, I'm drawing a blank on his name, though. What the hell is his name? Tall guy, European, had a temper. I forgot what the hell his name was. He ended up beating Nadal as well. In Wimbledon. I forgot what his name was. Maybe you could help me on the comment section. You know what I'm trying to say. Point is, we have seen some moments where some of the big 3 have been upset before, and it was relatively shocking. So this is definitely a big loss, but Dzanchulp's a well-known guy. I think that it's definitely a shock, but one of the biggest upsets of all time, I'd pump the brakes there. I'd say we have seen bigger upsets over the years, but still, straight sets is crazy. It's one thing to lose. It's another thing to lose without winning a single set. I think that's the shocking aspect of it. But my overall thoughts on the match were pretty simple. I thought that Dzanchulp was a brick wall, and I thought that he kind of just dared Alcaraz to hit winners. Excuse me, sorry. And Alcaraz just couldn't do it. Sorry, just have something with. Point is, though, Alcaraz really just couldn't hit many winners. It just seemed like he kept hitting unforced errors. And, sorry, I got really something in my throat. Either way, the point is, Dzanchulp played the match of his life, and he got the job done in straight sets. Alcaraz, though, really just had a hard time keeping the ball in play. It just seemed like Dzanchop was constantly in the right spot. He was anticipating really well, and Alcaraz just couldn't really find enough, I'd say, winning shots. Just seemed like Dzanchop got to everything, and Alcaraz eventually would just punt the shot. And that's kind of the story over and over again in this matchup. It just seemed like Alcaraz was constantly hitting unforced errors. Dzanchop kept the ball in play. A lot of neutral balls. Seemed like he was willing to let Alcaraz force the issue, and he did. And Alcaraz's shot selection was not great at all throughout the course of the match. A lot of unforced errors with drop shots, a lot of aggressive forehands that missed wide. It just seemed like Alcaraz was really all over the place over the course of the match, and Dzanchop stayed stoic. He stayed composed, and he was able to keep the ball in play, which was really all he needed for the sake of the matchup. But Alcaraz, we saw post-Olympics, lost him on feet. He's been vulnerable, and we ended up seeing him kind of unravel, both mentally in the Monfils match and physically in the Dzanchop match. He just couldn't keep a ball in play, and Dzanchop did what he had to do. He was overall just a solid brick wall, and that's all he needed. So point is, a nice win there for Dzanchop. Phenomenal upset, phenomenal win, and now that quarter is wide open. Apologies before about the throat. I don't know what happened. Just had something caught in my throat. Anyway, nothing else to really recap, though. For the women's side, you ended up seeing Rybakina drop out. Good thing that I faded her for the event. I don't trust Rybakina ever, and she ended up dropping out. And you saw Osaka lose to Mukova. I mentioned this before. I'll say it again. Osaka, post-comeback, is the most overrated player on the entire WTA Tour. She's not very good, just simply put. Now, I know that she almost beat Swiatek in the French Open, and that was kind of her, I'd say, blip on the radar of being back. I'll put quotes around back. She's not very good, and I feel like people keep expecting her to turn the clock back to when she won a couple Grand Slams. She's just not that person anymore, and I thought Mukova looked really good. Osaka, though, punted that free forehand on break point, which she was actually serving for the second set, and then eventually she lost via breaker. But Osaka really is just not that good, and her losing in the second round does not surprise me at all. Her odds are laughable in every event. Do not bet her to win the event because it's a waste of money. Anyway, point is, that's really all I have to say for the women's side. Nothing else to really talk about there. Let's move on into the third round. Before we get into the third round, though, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Nordic Fantasy, because they have Pick'em, which gives you a chance to win 1,000 times your entry. You can play fantasy football the right way with Best Ball. Best Mania is now live with $15 million in prizes. You can have specials and boosts in all your flex entries. And for the underdog entry, I'll probably do something with the WNBA. Maybe Caitlin Clark points and assists in that one. I might be tempted by that matchup coming up. But once again, sign up with the promo code SGPN to claim your special getting a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 bonus cash on fantasy. Promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the second round. Time to get into the actual third round for the U.S. Open. By the way, quick question. I see Wipeout asking me about the WNBA show that'll come out in the morning. Terrell and I are going to record that at around 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So that's going to come out in the morning. Anyway, time for the third round preview. Starting off with the first match on the card, you have a matchup, which should be a fun one, between Shelton and Tiafoe. I'm kind of shocked this is the morning match. I thought this would be the night match, if I had to guess. It was a rematch of the night match last year, and we saw Shelton win that one in 4. Now, Shelton is minus 155 in the rematch. Tiafoe's plus 135 for the spread, minus 1.5 for Shelton, plus 1.5 for Tiafoe. The over-under in games is 40.5. And for the set spread here, Shelton minus 1.5 sets is plus 140. Tiafoe plus 1.5 sets is minus 170. For the over 3.5 sets, you have plus 215. Now, for the head-to-head, in the past, Shelton is up 2-0. Faced off last year in the U.S. Open, Shelton won in 4. Faced off in Houston this year on clay, Shelton won in straight sets. So he won in 3. Point is, though, Tiafoe has played better over the last couple of weeks, has looked fine in the event. He kind of struggled in the first set against Shevchenko, but he coasted after that as he won in 2 sets and a retirement, and he beat Kovacevic in 4. Looked good early, but he kind of stumbled in the 3rd and 4th sets, got the job done, though. Kind of the story of Tiafoe, though, in general, he tends to be unable to play, I'd say, complete matches, and he has some mental lapses over the course of 3 to 5 sets. So I think that Shelton, with the serve, should be able to outlast him. Shelton's been great so far in the event. Beat Thiem. I know that he's about to retire, still won comfortably. and beat Agut in straight sets. I thought Agut would win one, and I thought that Shelton would win the match. That didn't happen. But Shelton was dominant, and we know his serve is definitely elite. So I do think you're looking at a spot where Shelton, I just trust more. I feel like we saw it in last year's match. Tiafoe, when things went poorly, especially in that third set breaker, which was very winnable, that he ended up losing 9-7 in, he immediately quit on the match. He immediately punted, and I feel like mentally, I trust Shelton's mental toughness a lot more than Tiafoe's mental toughness. So I'm going to go with Shelton in this one. I think it might go 5. Don't mind it. But I do think you're looking at a spot where Tiafoe's a guy mentally that I don't really trust, and he has had moments in the first 2 rounds where he's looked a little bit flat. I think Shelton will look pretty sharp, and I do think that with the overall crowd kind of being split down the middle, Shelton does play well in big environments, kind of like Tiafoe. So with this being the case, I'm going to lean to the Shelton in 4, if I had to guess. Maybe it goes 5, but I'll lean to Shelton in general. I think I'll get the job done. I'll lean to Shelton minus 1.5 as well for the side. Moving on to the next matchup, we're going to look at a matchup between we'll go with Griekspoor against Dimitrov. Now, for this one, you have Dimitrov as a massive favorite. Dimitrov is around minus 550. Griekspoor is around plus 430. For the game spread here, you have minus 5.5 for Dimitrov, plus 5.5 for Griekspoor. For the over-under, you have 36.5 games. And for the actual set spread here, you have Dimitrov in straight sets at plus 130. Griekspoor to win a set is minus 160. The over 3.5 sets is minus 130. Now head-to-head history. Griekspoor's tournament has been pretty tough to fully evaluate because he was able to beat Nagal in straight sets, who was in really bad form. Then he beat Baez, who was clearly injured, and ended up quitting in the second set. As for Dimitrov, he's looked very good, ended up winning in straight sets against Jacquet, and that was pretty easy. Then he had 2 very easy sets against Ichikata, and the third set was pretty competitive, but he won in a breaker. So the point is, I think that Dimitrov's going to win. The question is, where's the value located? Do I think Griekspoor can win a set here? I think he can, but it's tough to tell because Baez was so compromised that Griekspoor dominated. But I can't tell if it was Griekspoor being great or Baez being terrible. Probably somewhere in the middle. But if you want to go for a value play, Dimitrov to win the match and both players to win a set is plus 125 on Caesars. That I do like. I think that could have some value to it. I am going to lean to Dimitrov to get the job done. But I think this might be a 4 or 5 setter. If you want to play it safe, you could go with the over 3.5 sets in general, ignoring Dimitrov to win. That's a minus 130. I don't mind that. I think Griekspoor is good enough to win a set here. I think that Dimitrov is definitely vulnerable enough to have a mental lapse for about 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and that could be the break that Griekspoor would need to win a set. But I think that Dimitrov's going to win. Give me Dimitrov to win and both players to win a set at around plus 125 in the combo market. Moving on to the next match on the Friday card. You have a matchup between Nakashima and Musetti. For this one, Musetti's favored Nakashima's favored at about minus 160, give or take. And you're looking at Musetti being around plus 140. For the game spread here, minus 3 for Nakashima, plus 3 for Musetti. And for the over-under, 37.5 games. For the set spread, you have the minus 1.5 sets for Nakashima, plus 110. Musetti plus 1.5 sets is minus 140. The over 3.5 sets is minus 180. And the over 4.5 sets is plus 240. Now, for this one, Musetti is up 1-0, and that did the face-off on grass this year in London, and we saw Musetti win in 3. Now, really a tale of 2 different tournaments for these guys. Nakashima's been coasting, as Nakashima ended up winning in straight sets against Rune, and he won in straight sets against Kaza. As for Musetti, he went to 4 against Opelka, while winning 7-5 and a 7-6 set, so a couple competitive sets in there as well. And he beat Kekmanovic in a 5-setter, and he actually fought off a couple of match points. So I do think with this overall matchup, I'm going to go with the American. Give me Nakashima. I think that he's played better tennis over the last couple of weeks. I think that he's the better hardcourt player. Musetti's been very solid this season, mostly over the last couple of months on clay and on grass. On hardcourt, he's still not the best player because his serve is not great. So I think that Nakashima's serve is definitely a weapon that's going to give him a pretty serious advantage, in my opinion, in this matchup. Plus fatigue. Musetti's shown some durability and overall fitness after having the marathon run in Umag and then a decent run in the Olympics to a bronze medal. Point is, though, on hardcourt, I do think he has shown some serious, let's just say, flaws, and I think that Nakashima can capitalize on it. Because Kekmanovic had him on the ropes. That was a 5-setter, and we've seen Nakashima coast against Pretty decent hardcore players. Kazza made a deep run in the Australian Open, or I should say a respectable run. He's been struggling though since, so not exactly the most amazing win, but still a straight set win that was comfortable. And he killed Rune. Now, Rune didn't play well, but only losing 7 games to Rune on hard court's impressive. I'm going to go with Nakashima in this one. I think I am going to go with the games, though. I think I am going to go with the -3 for the games. Musetti, I think, might run out of gas, but at the end of the day, I don't think he's a good enough server to battle Nakashima. And I think Nakashima has some underrated net skills that he might actually deploy in this matchup, since we know Musetti stands about 10 feet behind the baseline. So I'm going to go with Nakashima in this one. I think his serve will be the main, I'd say, factor in this match. And if Nakashima hits enough first serves, she should win. So give me Nakashima, minus the 2.5 games or -3 games into this match. Moving on to the next matchup. We're going to look at a matchup between, where do I want to go for this one? For this one, we're going to go with Ruud against Shang. For this one, Ruud is a pretty big favorite. Ruud is around -255. Shang's about +215. For the game spread, -4.5 for Ruud, +4.5 for Shang. For the over-under, 37.5 games. For the set spread, Ruud -1.5 sets is -130. Shang +1.5 sets is even money. And for the over 3.5 sets, you have around -175. Now, I do think Ruud is going to win. Even though Shang was able to win in straight sets against Baena, he was struggling a bit physically at the end of that third set. So I do think that fatigue could be an issue. I thought Ruud, even though he dropped the set to Monfils, I thought he looked really good. And it was a pleasant sight to see because we had him to win the quarter as kind of a long shot play at about, I forgot what the exact price was. I think it was like 13-1 for him to win the quarter. Point is, though, Ruud's been playing some good tennis so far in the event. Monfils, we know, was in pretty good form, and he was able to win in 4 there. Was able to win in the first round against Ba. So he looked pretty sharp so far in the event. As for Shang, he was able to beat Baena in straight sets, had a war against Bublik. For this one, I think Ruud's going to win. The question is, does Shang actually finish the match? Because if Shang ends up going down early, and he's down like a set and a break, and there's some potential injury that's resurfacing, does he end up retiring? I don't know. For the sake of the value, though, even though Shang has been playing some good tennis, I think I have to lean to Ruud -1.5 sets here at -130. I just think the price is too good. And yes, he was able to beat Bublik, who's a head case, and he ended up beating Baena, who's a clay guy. I think Ruud is the better player, and I think that Shang's serve is really not that big of a weapon. And with Ruud in his deep returning position, Shang is not the most comfortable volleyer in the world. So I do think that you're looking at a spot where Ruud should be able to get some breakpoint chances, and I do think that Ruud will be able to break a couple times in order to get the sets in his favor. So I'm going to go with Ruud -1.5 sets here at -130. I think there's some value on that play. Moving on to the next match. Think we are going to only talk about the Djokovic match against Papiron for this one. We'll skip the Echeverry-Zverev match because I don't know if Echeverry is healthy, so I can't really talk about it. Point is, though, for this matchup, though, you have Djokovic as a massive favorite, obviously. Djokovic is around -850. For Papiron, he's around +575. For the game spread, -6.5 for Djokovic, +6.5 for Papiron. For the over-under, you have 35.5. And for the set total here, you have over 3.5 at -130, under 3.5 at even money. For the actual set spread here, you have Djokovic -2.5 sets at +110, Papiron +2.5 sets at -140. Now, Papiron, we saw win a title, 1,000 title a couple weeks ago. He's been good so far in the event. Beat Kwan and beat Martinez in straight sets. Djokovic has not dropped a set either, but he has not looked great as he was struggling a bit in that match against Desir, and physically, he has not looked that sharp in Arthur Ashe. We'll see how he looks in this particular matchup, but Papiron has faced off against Djokovic quite often recently. Faced off in Wimbledon, Papiron won a set, faced off in the Australian Open this year as well. He won a set, lost in 4. Faced off in Tokyo in 2019, Djokovic did win in straight sets. So, at first glance, I like Papiron to win a set. However, the market's already priced that into the equation because Papiron to win a set is -140. I was hoping that Djokovic should be like -110 to win in straight sets, but -140, I think the argument is Papiron is talented enough to win a set, and we saw him actually win the first set against Djokovic in Wimbledon. So if you want to actually go for a pretty unique play or a niche play, I don't mind Papiron to win the first set and Djokovic win the match. I think you might find some value on that. Do I think that Djokovic will win in straight sets? I'll put it this way, with Alcaraz losing, maybe he kind of ramped it up a bit because there's a little bit more of, I'd say, signs of alertness of, oh, you can lose to anybody, a reminder. So don't overlook Papiron. But I think Papiron's good enough to actually win a set here. And Djokovic has not looked that great. He got kind of bailed out by Degier's health deteriorating over the course of that match. So I do think Degier was actually on pace to maybe win a set, and he couldn't convert a break point. But he had some chances, and eventually his body betrayed him. So for this one, I think I am going to go with the long shot play here. By the way, Papiron to win the first set and Djokovic to win the match is plus 390. Not the odds I was actually looking for, so I think I'm going to pass on that. I think I'm going to take the games. I'll go with Papiron plus 6.5. I think he can hang in there. I think he might get some 6-4s, maybe a breaker, but I am going to lean to Papiron plus the games because even if he loses in straight sets, there's still an angle for him to cover. So give me Papiron plus 6.5. I'll lean that way. Djokovic has looked fine, but I don't think he's looked amazing, and Papiron's has looked really sharp. So give me Papiron to cover the game spread in this one. Moving on to the card on Saturday. For this one, a couple of matches that I think are intriguing, but I'm not sure if I actually want to take them. So we have no lines on the de Minaur match and no lines on the de Zandschulp match, so keep that in mind. For this one, we'll start off with the Arnaldi and Thompson match. Tom's is minus 137, and you have Arnaldi at plus 110. You have no head-to-head meetings. Thompson has been pretty sharp as he was able to win in straight sets against Lestien and Hurkacz in the first two rounds of the event. He also looked pretty good in Cincinnati as he was able to beat Humbert in 3 and ended up beating Baez in straight sets. Then he got injured as he ended up having to retire. So the point is he was in good form in general. He's had a pretty good past couple of months. Arnaldi's been good, though, as he beat Safulin in straight sets and Svaja in straight sets. For this one, simply put, give me the over, and I think you're going to see, once again, another over 3.5 sets, maybe a 4.5 sets. The over 3.5 sets should be like minus 210, if I had to guess. So I don't mind that in a parlay. I see a war here. I think that Thompson I'd lean to because I do think that he's the better server. But I do think that you're looking at what should be the makings of a war. Arnaldi, we know, constantly has battles, not so much in the first two rounds here. But I think Thompson has the current form that can challenge Arnaldi, and I think Arnaldi can force Thompson into some unforced errors based on his overall court coverage. So I see a bit of a balancing act here. I'll go with the over, and I think you're going to see probably a 4 or 5 setter as this match unfolds. Moving on, though, to the next match we're going to talk about. You have a matchup between... Oh, by the way, we have no lines on the Kaboli and Medvedev match as well. Or the Mensik match too. So we're kind of limited here. For the next match, going to look at, where do I want to go here? We'll go with Sinner against O'Connell for this one. So Sinner's obviously a massive favorite, about minus 5,000, 10,000. For the actual money line for O'Connell, you have 20-1. For the head-to-head history, O'Connell did win the first meeting back in Atlanta in 2021. Then they faced off this year in Miami. Sinner beat O'Connell 6-4, 6-3. Now, O'Connell did win in 4. In the first 2 rounds, beat Bellucci and beat Jari. Sinner, after struggling early on against McDonald, has dominated as he has won the last 6 sets and he has not dropped more than 4 games in any of those sets. Plus, he's dropped less than 3 games in 5 of those 6. So, for the sake of this matchup, I think Sinner's going to kill him. I'm trying to figure out what the actual value is going to be because I don't see much. Maybe the under, or maybe like no tie break if you can find that as an angle, but I'm going to have to look that up, actually. The point is I think Sinner's going to dominate, and it seems like after the early jitters against McDonald, he's really settled in, and he's looked dominant. So I think with that being the case, I just think O'Connell doesn't exactly have the, I'd say, weapons to challenge Sinner, and I think that's going to be kind of the story of the matchup. But tough to find value when you have basically a minus 10,000 favorite in the matchup. So I'll link to Sinner, but nothing else really to talk about. I'll link to the under in that match. Either way, there's nothing else to really talk about because we're missing a bunch of lines for the Friday matches. For the Saturday matches, Either way, though, time to get into the lock and dog picks for the third round. Before we get into that, though, and remember once again, that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because Rhythm can help you build your own betting model for football, or you could just also use models that they have prepared for you. They have predictions on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. You could also use their overall predictions for individual games and player props, and they also give you a bunch of stats, trends, and research that can help give you betting insights. You're also looking at the model loving Delaware State and the points in week 0, which ended up getting there easily. A reminder, they can claim your 7 free trial today by going to sportscampus.com Rhythm, sportscampus.com, which is RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the third round. Now it's time to get into the lock and dog picks for the show. A reminder, we're kind of limited because we're missing a decent amount of matches for Saturday for betting purposes for the lines. But for the lock, I am going to go back to a matchup that I actually mentioned for the Friday card. Should mention I skipped these two matches. I saved them for the end of the show. For the lock, I'm going to go to a matchup between Leheshka and Rublev. For this one, I am going to go with the over 3.5 sets at minus 150. Rublev did win in 5 against Rinderknech in the last round, mostly because Rinderknech's body betrayed him, and he had to basically, I don't want to say quit, but I think that we all know he kind of was punting some games there, just based on how exhausted he was. The weather was brutal for him, and Rublev was kind of fortunate that Rinderknech ran out of gas. He was down 2-0, and he really has not looked that great in the event. He had a couple close sets you can see with Wild as well. And we know Leheshka is a very solid hardcourt player. Leheshka, though, has been a bit vulnerable. He has lost at least 1 set in 3 straight matches. Now, Leheshka, I do think, has the overall serve that can give Rublev problems. He's a very solid player. I think he's a top 20 talent in the world. And I think that with Rublev's inconsistency and with his lack of, let's say, emotional control, I think Leheshka can get under his skin. And I do think that there's some value at minus 150. Plus, the head-to-head is tied 2-2. So Leheshka's had some success against Rublev in the past, but I think that the over 3.5 sets to minus 150 is a good deal. Leheshka also went 5 sets in the last round against Kruger, but he did not show really any signs of fatigue, and he was able to come back. So I like his current form. We saw him beat Medvedev a couple weeks ago. He's been solid, and I do think that Rublev will probably win, but not in straight sets. Give me the over 3.5 sets here at minus 150 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to a matchup between Makic and Goffin, a rematch actually of Wimbledon. And a reminder, this was actually the match that Goffin blew a 5-0 lead in the final set, which is one of the biggest choke jobs of all time. That was actually this matchup. So Goffin was up, I believe, 2-0 and a break in Wimbledon. And then he ended up not only getting broken back and eventually dropping the third set, he also dropped the fourth, and he led 5-0 in the fifth, and he lost. Now, the question is, does Goffin get his revenge, or does Makic build off of the last 3 sets and dominate? I'm leaning to option B. I think Makic has been great. We saw Goffin beat Mannarino. Was not easy. Probably should have won 5. Mannarino ended up blowing a 5-2 lead in the 4th set. So Goffin wasn't good. It just felt like Mannarino kind of fumbled the golden opportunity to go to a 5th. And Goffin did struggle to serve a lot in the match. He got broken a total of 7 times in 4 sets. 7. That's pretty rough. We know Makic has a much better serve than Mannarino does, so I do think that Goffin's lack of, let's just say, serving strength is going to be his undoing in the matchup here. But Makic has not dropped the set yet. He was able to destroy Korda in the second round. I think Korda is actually a good opponent to prepare him for Goffin. Korda's probably better than Goffin, but both guys keep the ball in play. They're very patient, and I do think that you're going to see a lot of baseline rallies, but Makic destroying a pretty solid baseliner in Korda does give me a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to beat Goffin in this matchup. And I think that Goffin, once again, being able to beat Mannarino in 4, who was 1-10 in his last 11 matches, and that was really a war. I think it's a good spot for Makic, and I think that you're looking at a pretty good price here for him to win in 3 or 4 sets at even money. I like the price quite a bit, so I'm going to go with that as my dog. So once again, my picks for the show, the lock's going to be on Leheshka and Rublev over 3.5 sets to minus 150, and my dog's going to be on Makic minus 1.5 sets against Goffin at even money. A reminder back once again for the 4th round of the U.S. Open in a couple days. Until then, though, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the WNBA show. A reminder, we're going to have an episode for the WNBA on, I should say at a pretty reasonable time, about 11 a.m. Eastern. So stay tuned for that in the morning. Till next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.